Horror Hive.
Car Dealership Curiosities by Tiggles. Introduction. For the past 4 months, February until present, I've worked at a car dealership as a lot attendant. My job is to sticker the used cars, make sure nothing's missing, and do odd jobs. I can't drive yet. I'm still in the process of getting my license. I'm only 16 and started late on driver's ed, so I can't move cars, but I'm hoping to be able to do so within the next month. The only reason I have the job is because my father works here. I'm not going to give out the name of the dealership so that the ghost hunters and thrill seekers don't take up all of our parking spaces and crowd the showroom floor. Since I've started working here, I've had my fair share of creepy things happen, including seeing figures that for the moment I'm calling ghosts. Sounds insane, right? But I've spent enough time in our used car line to know that it's all real. It has to be. So here are a couple of stories from what I've seen within my time here at Auto Traders. Number 1. Dodge Caliber. So, a while back in March, a used car with a rejected sticker on the windshield came into the PDI line. Pretty much the "we're gonna fix up your mess car and then sell it as if nothing happened" line. It had heavily, illegally tinted windows, and one of its headlights was out. Inside there were black leather seats with red stitching. One of the vents to the AC had been ripped out, and the radio didn't work. Nothing too out of the order, especially because of the area we're near. After it was cleared from the PDI line, it was my job to get the stickers on it. I printed off the window stickers, grabbed the price, year, and any other stickers I needed, and the keys from the machine. I then headed out into the car. This time, when I had looked inside the car, everything was fixed. The windows were brought to the highest amount of tint that is legally allowed here, and the vent was fixed. I sat down in the front seat and threw the stickers in the back without even looking. This is where the creep factor starts up. I heard a voice from behind me. "Drive." What? I thought to myself. Did I hear something wrong, or... By the time I had hit the word "or" in my own thoughts, my eyes wandered to the rear-view mirror. A figure was in the back seat, but out of fear, I never looked fully after seeing black, scraggly hair. "Drive." The voice sounded a bit more assertive this time. I got the hell out of the car. It's the same feeling as when a bee flies by your ear and you can't help but flinch. It took me about 5 minutes to muster up the courage to open up the back seat to grab the stickers I had left. Don't need my boss getting mad at me over wasted material. There was nobody in the car. No door had opened or closed from the time I had gotten in or out of the car, other than my own. I opened the 2 backseat doors, just in case, and then sat down to begin putting the window stickers on. You get a really hefty fine if those specific stickers are missing when an inspector shows up, so I had to at least get this done. Upon sitting down, the seat was warm. Me, being my ignorant, naive self, said, "Sick, heated seats," and put the stickers on. I closed the doors, and this time didn't forget the stickers. I put the price and year stickers on, and then, because I have to for protocol reasons, read the window stickers. I totally forgot to beforehand, and I had to make sure this was the right car. The car's ID number, VIN number, and description all matched. But one thing was missing. Heated seats. The car was on the entire time, and I needed that key. So I opened up all the car's doors, sat down in the front seat again, put my foot on the brake, turned the key to off, and proceeded to hastily close every door and get as far away as I could. This was on a rainy, cloudy, cold March morning. There was no way in hell that seat was supposed to be warm. I'm just happy it's sold. Number 2. Football Creep. So, next to the dealership, there's this huge field for Pee-wee football. They play every single day, and the only reason they'll stop is thunder and lightning, heavy snow, or natural disaster. We literally have signs that say no football parking, because of the sheer amount of people who try to park here. It's fun though, because I get to be lot police. Anyone who refuses to move gets towed. I feel like such a badass while doing it, even though it's just petty parking bullshit. They are crazy, but hey, we all need a hobby, I guess. For a few days in the month of April, there was this guy who would sit behind the fence and laugh like a crazy person. Hell, I couldn't even tell if he was watching the game. After a few days of seeing this, I walked up to him. He'd only be there for an hour or so at a time, but I needed to know why. If he's not buying a car, why is he here? Why not go onto the field to watch the game, or act crazy? Our conversation went as such. Hey, are you alright? Fine. You know you can go on the field, right? Fine. So, we're in agreement then? Fine. You okay? Fine. Okay, well, thank you. Fine. And that was it. He just responded to everything with fine. I was just like, awesome. More crazy people to deal with on a daily basis. My co-worker had given me a ride in a Corolla to that side of the dealership because of how far it was away from the entrance. By dealership, I mean the entire property. But looked really puzzled when I came back. Did you see that guy? What a creep. Why were you out there talking to yourself? What? Dude, the fuck do you mean? I was talking to myself. Well, for a straight 5 minutes, I watched you stand there and have a conversation with yourself. Did you not see the guy? What guy? Why did you waste my time with this shit? I have better things to do than deal with some weird prank. No, dude, seriously. It was at this point I explained the conversation to him. He seemed pretty weirded out. But I don't really think he believed me. I looked back and the guy was gone. I haven't seen him since, but his face now resonates in my brain. This is one of the creepiest things that has ever happened to me, and I never look at that spot the same. I always check it out though. I just need some confirmation that I'm not going crazy. But he never shows up. The weirdest part of it all? There was no way I was there for 5 minutes. Read the dialogue over, and try to stretch the conversation with a guy over 5 minutes. His responses were immediate, and I spoke at a normal speed. It makes no sense. Number 3. The Case of the Moving Mustang. There's a red convertible 2017 Ford Mustang that's been at dealership since I've started. Normal, right? It's always parked somewhere different at different points in the day, which is also normal, because salespeople have no concept of put the car back where you found it. But when I say everywhere, I mean everywhere. I've found it at every corner of the dealership, including the pit, where we store all the new cars we don't have room for. That's on the literal opposite end from where it belongs in the used line. I got sick of it about a month ago. Nobody talks about the car, and from my knowledge, nobody has tried selling it. They removed the price stickers from it, however, without telling me, which normally is a dick move, but I'll let it slide. We have a machine that I mentioned earlier that holds all of our keys. It has a keypad, in which everyone has their own individual code, a camera that snaps a picture every time you put a code in, and a whole separate website database, in which stores those pictures, names, codes, and all the other info you might need about a key that was taken out or put in automatically. I got curious and wanted to know who was moving it all the time. I was going to print out their pictures. Right, Auto Trader's Most Wanted, and hang it around the dealership like my co-worker did a while back, when this one guy kept using someone else's number in the key machine. The database said this about the key. I'm going to put a random ID and simplify what it said for your reading pleasure. ID number BM234445671A. Number of keys 1. Year 2017. Make model Mustang Ford. Color red. Date in April 14th, 2017. Employee Charlie Dankowitz. Date out blank. Employee blank. That was the only entry. I made up the name for privacy reasons. Normally there's a date out, but this entry means that this was the date that the key was put into the system. There's only one key for the car, so how in the shit is this car moving everywhere? No one will talk to me about the car, as if it's some unspoken rule, and none of the customers gravitate towards it. This is the newest entry. ID BM234445671A. Number of keys 1. Year 2017. Make model Mustang Ford. Color red. Date in April 14th, 2017. Employee Charlie Dankowitz. Date out June 9th, 2018. Employee my name, last, first. I'm going to find out the mystery behind this car, even if I have to do it all by myself. It's been exactly a week, and nobody has even noticed the key going missing. The car still moves, and nobody will answer me, except for my co-worker. The most I've gotten from him, Charlie, is, stop looking into it. It's not important. That's helpful. I'm hoping to have an update on it eventually, but for now it's pretty much an innocent Herbie without the low hand. I'm actually writing this at work. I've had nothing to do all day, so I started writing about my experiences. Charlie has been reading them over, and just told me the Dodge is back at our dealership. Illegal tinted windows, and almost completely totaled when it was brought back in. I had no idea because I never go into the shop. The radio doesn't work again, and all the vents are missing. I don't even know how to explain this one. I have to sticker it again, and that's the most nerve-wracking thing ever. It's in the PDI line for its final check, and should be ready for next Saturday. Hooray. If you want a part 2, let me know. I have a bunch of other stories to tell, and I have no plans of quitting soon because of that Mustang. Otherwise, I hope you at least enjoyed these ones. Good evening, listeners. It's me, your host, Ramblingramm. I'm here with some more stories to scare, shock, and horrify you. Or possibly, just possibly, let you know what's really out there in the dark. Enjoy, listeners. Die Violently by Elias Witherow. I was going to bed. I was tired, just like you're supposed to be. I laid down, turned the light off, and closed my eyes. And then I waited, just like I was supposed to. Falling asleep is a little like standing on the shores of a beach. The waves lapping at your feet, until suddenly you're sinking beneath the wet surface. Well, I was sinking. No, I mean I was literally sinking. I didn't notice it until it was too late. I opened my eyes and felt panic. The walls of my comforter stretched high overhead. I was in a pit. A hole. An abyss made from my own bed. I tried to sit up. I couldn't. I tried to grab the walls of fabric. I couldn't. I tried to scream. That worked. After my cry slithered from my lips, I realized I was still sinking. Deeper. Deeper. Deeper, and I was unable to stop it or slow my descent. The cloth walls continued to elongate, and soon the circle of darkness overhead was swallowed from sight. I was far, far down. It was then that I began to feel something press against the walls of my sinking vessel. It felt like hands. Groping, grabbing, reaching, poking. I battered them away, horrified and confused, another shriek finding my lips. I descended past the hands. They vanished like they had never been. I tried to roll over. I couldn't. I could only lay on my back and listen to the rustle of covers as they dipped and stretched, taking me down into whatever place this was. My heart was racing, so fast, alarmingly fast. Next came the whispers. It sounded like there were people just on the other side of the fabric. They were conversing with one another in hushed tones, like they didn't want me to hear what they were saying. I'm not 100% on this, but I could have sworn I heard one of them say my name. Then they were gone as well. Down, down, down. My compressed hammock of madness and impossibility continuing to elongate like a piece of warm toffee. I called for help. What the fuck else was I supposed to do? Of course, no one heard me because wherever I wasn't anywhere. I remember thinking at that exact moment that I was trapped in a nightmare. I tried to wake myself up. My arms were working, which was good. I pinched, slapped, and even punched myself. I didn't wake up because I already was. I began to feel claustrophobic. The hot cotton walls pressed in all around, and I felt myself break out in a sweat. The air was hot and heavy with darkness. I think I started to cry. That's when I heard something above me, like something was crawling down toward me. Whatever it was, it scuttled, like it had a dozen legs all moving in unison. It was getting closer. I could hear it getting closer, shoving itself down after me, for me. I could hear it breathing. The ragged breaths came just as quickly as the other sounds. Something definitely said my name then. It was loud, clear, and directed right at me. Except the voice came from below, where my hole hadn't reached yet. "Stop it!" I shrieked uselessly. The thing above me hurried faster, pressing itself through the smooth throat of fabric. I waited for the inevitable hand at my throat, or perhaps claw. Maybe a sudden sliver of glistening teeth lunging for my throat. The voice below me spoke again. "No!" The scuttling ceased, and my hole, my prison, continued to plummet. "Let me out!" I howled, thrashing about. I was panicking. I knew I was panicking. But Jesus Christ, wouldn't you? Exhausted, trapped, and now sweating profusely, I stilled. I sucked in thick lungfuls of hot air. I was crying. I felt like I was dying. I jerked my head to the left and then the right. I needed something. Anything. I needed hope. Something I was sorely lacking in that terrifying moment. There. What was that? It was a hole. Just the tiniest of things. It was located where my left ear had been pressed against. Adjusting myself, a pitiful cry escaping, I pressed my eye to it, out past the itchy walls of my comforter. And what I saw has led me to write this. There were millions of us. The world was gone. There were no houses, no roads, no hills, no mountains. There were no cars, no cities, no trees, and no fucking taxes. An expanse of endless stars littered the vast eternity, but they didn't twinkle with that slightly off-blue hue you're used to seeing. No. These stars were purple, and they moved. They zigzagged and crossed one another. They rose and then fell. They raced and then slowed. I felt my bladder release. An unfortunate accident considering the circumstances. On second thought, when is a good time to piss your pants? Regardless, I observed the purple stars with overwhelming shock. I noticed that whenever they changed directions, they did so at a sharp 90-degree angle. That probably meant something, if any of this meant anything. I pulled my eyes away from the stars and focused on the other occupants of the sky. The millions like me. Millions of blankets descending the forever space, dripping down through the cosmos like strands of multicolored jewel from the mouth of the universe. All of us cocooned in our own blanket of choice, our vessels in this strange alien world. I cocked my eye down below, down to where we were all headed. If I had any more piss to offer, my blankets would have drunk it down once more. Sitting cross-legged at the depths of the Eternal was an absolutely enormous entity. It was humanoid in shape, its colossal torso a pulsing mass of purple stardust. It glowed with an almost blinding radiance, an ever-shifting conglomeration of light pieced together by fragments reaching the trillions in number. Rising from its back was a titanic construct that I can only describe as a tree. Its trunk emerged from the alien figure and soared high over its head, its branches reaching and spreading to the very corners of existence. It appeared to be composed of the same strange purple stardust and endless blinking buzz like neon fireflies. Hanging from the branches like ornaments were countless solar systems. Pink, green, blue, black, gold, crimson, every colour ever seen. They swirled and spun and breathed and existed entirely in place. A buffet of spectacle like you've never seen before. I retraced my eyes back to the entity. Back to the head. It was wrapped in black cloth. Layer and layers and fucking layers of the stuff. Sliced along the mountains of fabric was a mouth that exhaled great gales of purple smog that lazily drifted out from the teeth the size of the sun. If the sun had been diced up, the pieces gathered, and then had been slammed inside the mouth of the most terrifying creature ever imagined. The mouth was moving, and that was because the entity's two arms were moving. I followed the miles of stardust that composed the limbs all the way to the end, all the way to the hands, the fingers, and what the fingers were holding. Spoons, one in each hand, enormous, shining, dazzling spoons, each one capable of hosting all the stars discovered by mankind. I watched in absolute horror as the entity extended its arms and began to catch the dripping, hanging, descending blankets in the sky. It gathered them with caution, making sure each one landed in one of the great caverns of its utensils. I was still very far away from this cosmic nightmare, which gives testament to its size, and another scream rattled my throat. I was having a bad night, okay? Christ. Unable to look away, I watched as the stardust being filled its spoons, and then slowly brought them to its mouth, toward that quarter-moon hole that had been cut in the midnight fabric that encased its head. The entity emptied the spoons into its mouth, and immediately its body pulsed with staggering light. I blinked and squinted, not wanting to look away. When the creature swallowed, the stardust around its body surged and then drifted off, like it was shedding some kind of dead skin. The millions of lights that floated away hung in the air for a fraction of a second, before suddenly blinking purple once more, and then zipping off into space, jerking and moving at sharp right angles. Before I could utter some obvious statement of disbelief, shock, or confusion, I was suddenly jerked violently up. I screamed in surprise, the sudden movement interrupting my long, steady descent. I gripped the sides of my blanket and another pull gave me whiplash. Something was bringing me back up. Something was taking me out of here. I spun around and cast one look at the entity below. It was smiling at me, its sun-shard teeth like knives in the ebony emptiness beyond. When I woke up, a hot girl was making out with me. Okay, that's not entirely true. She was giving me CPR. What do you want from me? I'm a pig, okay? Fuck off. Coughing, lunging upright, I breathed for the first time in what felt like years. I blinked, wiped my eyes, and the hot girl was saying my name. I looked around. I was in my apartment. I was in bed. The lights were on. I looked at the girl. It was my girlfriend. She had come over, a surprise sleepover, and found me already in bed and asleep. Well, not quite. She had found me choking on something. She had found me seconds before I died. You see, as I drifted off to sleep, a massive spider had crawled up onto my bed and down my throat. My loving girlfriend, performing an act of utmost bravery, had reached down past my lips, tongue and teeth and retrieved the murderer, and then she had killed it, making her the murderer. Realizing I wasn't breathing anymore, something needed for living, my princess in shining armor had given me CPR and managed to pull me out of my slow plunge toward death. Because at the end of the day, that's what I think I saw. I think I saw millions of people dying in their sleep, from one cause or another. So, do yourself a favor. When you die, die violently. Well, listeners, I sincerely hope you enjoyed the tales that I brought you this evening. It would be a great pleasure to me if you would like, comment, and subscribe, if you're not already a subscriber. And please wait for me to bring you more tales, to alter your perception of how the world may really be. This is Ramblingramm, signing off. Good night, listeners, and sweet dreams. Good evening, listeners. It's me, your host, Ramblingramm. I'm here with some more stories to scare, shock, and horrify you. Or possibly, just possibly, let you know what's really out there in the dark. Enjoy, listeners. The Town That Ate People by I Enjoy Cake. A lot of weird shit happens in New England. If you live here, it's not hard to imagine why so many tales of the obscure, the horrific, and the obscene are birthed here. It's not the kind of weird shit that's happening in Florida, though. There's a sense of antiquity that permeates the air throughout the region, found through the wind blowing through creaky ancient homes, the plethora of decrepit abandoned towns, and worn, aged roads paved during the infancy of America. There was a small town in Massachusetts that I shall not name. Its rotting homes lay vacant, its stores barren and blanketed in cobwebs, and its people long gone. An ominous feeling chokes the atmosphere of the abandoned settlement, and few people are either dumb enough or brave enough to go near it. The only sound that dares to break the eerie silence aside from vermin is the rushing of the river that divides the town into two sections. An ancient rickety bridge still connects both sides, standing feebly over black waters. Many old small towns and villages are empty in elder states, fading into obsolescence as the young move away to join the modern world, and the old either follow or wither away into nothingness, leaving a settlement of only dust and bones. This is not the case for the town I speak of. Its people were content to stay there, and the community thrived on a mix of humble tradition and an acceptance of what the 21st century had brought. It was not their wish to leave, but they had no choice except to flee. For years a sinister presence lurked in the shadows of this town. Oblivious to the menace eyeing them from the darkness, people went about their lives in the most ordinary fashion as ever. On September 17th, 1999, 6-year-old Dennis Ackerman, a pseudonym for confidentiality, as all of these names shall be, left for school in the morning and was never seen again. The whole town was in hysterics over his disappearance. Things of note rarely ever happened there. It was all that people talked about for months as police and townspeople desperately searched for the missing child, combing over what seemed like every inch of land within miles of the town. After an entire year of searching for at least some tiny shred of evidence, town officials gave up on searching for the boy who had vanished without a trace. Dennis's mother was in absolute hysterics, inconsolably and understandably furious that they would just give up on the boy. In a rage, she stabbed her husband 63 times after he returned home from the bar that he had taken to visiting nightly after his son's disappearance. A neighbour heard her rabid screaming and called the police. The sheriff arrived to find Mr. Ackerman in a pool of his own blood, seeping from the visceral wounds covering his entire body. He drew his gun, anxious to find Mrs. Ackerman. It wasn't long before he did, as she dangled from a noose in the living room. The atmosphere of the town was never the same after that incident. People spoke in hushed tones, doors were locked at night, and relationships between friends, family, and neighbours grew colder. No one had left yet, but things had only just begun. Sunday, April 22nd, 2001. 2 young girls by the names of Lily and Delilah Aberdeen had been on their way home from church with their parents. Mr. and Mrs. Aberdeen were walking just a few feet in front of the girls when they noticed it was suspiciously quiet. Nervous, but not yet panicking, they looked for the girls with the notion that maybe they had snuck off to go do something naughty, or saw an animal and chased it. Minutes passed. Hours passed. Not a trace was found of the girls, and the police were summoned to help search. Identical to the case of Dennis Ackerman, Lily and Delilah had vanished completely without a trace. Neither were to be seen again. The Aberdeens lived under a dark cloud, their souls irreparably torn from the loss of their children. They divorced, and the former Mrs. Aberdeen moved away. Mr. Aberdeen, on December 11th of the same year, drunkenly stumbled out of the local pub and into the night, never to be seen again. His disappearance was taken less seriously. People slowly started to filter out of the town. Every few months or so, someone would move away, driven away by sheer paranoia. I can't say I blame them. Things started to get much, much worse, following an incident in 2003. March 14th was an exciting day for the local elementary school. A field trip to the bakery in town was set up for the entire first grade class. The bakery was within walking distance of the school, so a cavalcade of chaperones were trying their best to herd a throng of bug-eyed 6 and 7-year-olds toward the bakery on Main Street. A little boy named Jonathan Macleod tripped and fell onto the sidewalk. His teacher, Mr. Patterson, rushed over to make sure the boy was okay. However, Jonathan was gone. It seemed he had vanished from the spot. Feeling his heart drop into his stomach, Patterson brushed aside the leaves of a nearby bush, hoping to see Jonathan peering out at him, ready to play peekaboo. He was not. Everyone tensed as Patterson began to yell frantically that a boy was gone. The kids were rounded up and were to follow another teacher, Mrs. Alloway, to the bakery and stay put while the others looked for Jonathan. The 5 other chaperones, all either teachers or parent volunteers, split up to search the area for Jonathan, while Mrs. Alloway called the police. Mrs. Alloway, spurting and huffing frantically into her phone, didn't notice how eerily quiet it had become on the way to the bakery. She turned around to check on the kids, and fainted when she saw that they were all gone. She cracked her skull on the sidewalk, and bled until her soul packed its things and left for the pearly gates. The entire town was in an uproar. 15 children had gone missing instantaneously. A teacher had died, and 2 of the chaperones had never returned. The media finally began to take notice, and the story of the town that seemed to swallow people was sensationalized throughout the nation. People began to lose their composure. Those that didn't just pack up their entire livelihoods and flee stayed behind and wallowed in an atmosphere of complete and utter despair. Fights broke out frequently. Houses and stores were broken into. People looked at one another with venom in their eyes and their minds. The police stopped caring. Paparazzi, desperate to get more information on the case, hounded those that dared leave their homes. Most of the town folks began to have enough, and started stockpiling rations and boarding up their homes from the inside. A naive amateur reporter from Boston, Louise Applegate, again, all pseudonyms, had shown up by herself to cover the story, with the hope that its current popularity would launch her career into the professional reporting sphere. Her hopes withered as door after door either refused to open or slammed in her face as she tried to interview different residents of the town. Desperate, she turned to trying to coax any information she could out of anyone on the streets or in stores. But everyone was either another reporter from out of town, or stone-faced and silent. Frustration brewed within her as each possible well for more info ran dry. She decided that she'd find out for herself. In the dinky grey jeep that she had driven into town, Louise had stalled an ensemble of recording equipment. She had spent the majority of the birthday money from her wealthy parents last year on a variety of cameras and their accompanying tools and gadgets. She spent the remainder of that afternoon fastening small cameras to trees, fences, poles, and even planted a few on poles in the ground. She probably planned to retrieve them all the following morning. She never got to. Her parents being of notable wealth and a degree of power, they made an uproar of her disappearance. Search and rescue teams, forensics, feds, all sorts were called in to find this girl. The residents of the town were as reclusive as ever, but with suits running all over town, people couldn't exactly refuse to give up information without getting a gun drawn on them. I spearheaded that search. I was the big man in the suit knocking on doors, asking the questions, intimidating the answers out of those poor souls. Louise's jeep sat in the same spot she'd left it in, and we already had that area taped off. Finally, after getting little out of the other residents, some dead-eyed old man told me he'd seen her putting up cameras at some point. I knew I had to find those ASAP. My guys found them all pretty quickly. We had to transfer the footage onto one of our laptops to watch any of it, and most of the recordings were nothing. But one of the cameras that she'd set up on a tree near the bridge had caught something. In this video, like the others, it started with Louise turning the camera on after setting it up. After making sure it was in place, she'd usually wander off to go set up another. But this time, I saw a large dark silhouette looming behind her. Before she could even take a single step, it lunged at her with lightning speed, covering her mouth with a large dark green hand, muffling her screams as it dragged her away. That was all I needed to see. I called off the search and rescue teams and shooed them away for the night. This wasn't just a missing persons case anymore. Someone, or something, had taken Louise Applegate, and it could be exactly what caused all of the other disappearances. I called for reinforcements, and within an hour they showed up with the extra men and gear we needed to start our manhunt. Guns, night vision headgear, flares, first aid kits, climbing gear, etc. Everything you needed to do anything outdoors was brought with to help us find either the girl, the kidnapper, or both. We started at the tree by the river and descended the small path that stopped just above the black water. I had teams searching all over the place, and my team and I followed this thin trail along the river. It was the direction that the perpetrator in the footage had dragged Louise, and the path was the only other way by the tree other than just turning around. The trail broadened a bit as it snaked alongside the river that twisted wildly through the woods that grew denser by the minute. I stopped in my tracks when I saw a clump of bright blonde hair wrapped around a damp branch, jutting out of the surface of the river. It matched the colour of Louise's hair that I'd seen in pictures and in her recordings. We had searched the section of river that ran directly through town for a body, but not this far down. Not even an hour later we had a few personnel down in those waters again. I was one of those that went. We found out that the river was far deeper here than it had been just a mile or so where it ran through town. We also found a cave entrance. No one else was finding shit on land, so the cave was the best shot we had at the time of finding anything useful. The cave tunneled straight down for a little while before winding upward again. I was almost shocked when suddenly my face met cool, damp air. The other members of my team surfaced and silently waited for my instruction. There was a little incline ahead, but in the light of my headlamp, I could see a tall ceiling above us. I went first, pulling myself up over the mossy, slimy stone ledge. I helped my teammates up and radioed my crew on land that we'd found what appeared to be a massive underground cave. I looked around, the light of my headlamp piercing through the oppressive darkness. On the cave floor, I saw bones. Human bones. I pulled out my gun from its waterproof case, and my teammates followed suit. There wasn't much else in this first area, and the cave wall curved to the right just a few yards ahead from where we stood. Slowly, and as quietly as a sopping wet mob of agents could be, we moved forward. When I rounded that corner, I saw something that I wish I could burn out of my mind with a bullet. We found Louise. She was in several pieces, distributed among several of these fucking things that were tearing through what remained of her flesh. Clumps of her long blonde hair were strewn about like confetti. A mountain of bones towered in the middle of this cavern. Like deer in headlights, these creatures stared at us wide-eyed and frozen. Their eyes were bulbous, dark voids that glistened in our headlamp beams. Their skin was a disgusting, pustulant, dark green reminiscent of a lumpy toad's. Rows of razor-sharp, triangular teeth protruded from their fish-like maws, and black talons gleamed at the ends of their webbed fingers. They were eerily human-like in stature. I regret not just shooting them on sight, but I was fucking frozen. There is nothing I am more ashamed of than that moment. One of them took advantage of my pause and grabbed one of the agents next to me, sinking its yellowing teeth into her throat. We opened fire, shooting wildly and desperately, knowing that we either would leave this cave alive or find ourselves residents in that mountain of bones. They hissed and squealed, their cries the most repulsive thing I've heard in my fucking life. They were so goddamn fast too. Explains how they grabbed people so quickly. Those motherfuckers moved lightning fast. I went into that cave with 8 people. I ended up leaving with 2. We took out as many of those things as we could, but ammo is a finite resource, and humans are very fragile and slow. They stopped coming for us when there was a huge pile of them bleeding to death on the floor. I pushed my 2 remaining men ahead of me the way we had come in, and we booked it the hell out of there. I fired behind us to make sure we wouldn't be followed. My radio had started going insane, because I had been taking too long to report again. I managed to blurt out we're alive before going back into the water and swimming as fast as I goddamn could. Help was waiting at the surface and dragged us out of the water as soon as they saw us. I let my guys go out first, and as I was being lifted out of the water, I felt a hand grab my leg. I looked down and saw a disgustingly slimy green hand wrapped around my ankle. Fortunately, someone was paying attention and unloaded their gun into the water. A bullet or 2 grazed my calf and ankle, but fortunately, their aim was just good enough that I guess they hit that thing and its grip went limp. I got the hell out of the water, and we quarantined that area faster than you can lock your front door. I didn't go back down there, but we destroyed the hell out of that cave and everything in it. We dug and drilled holes directly into the dry parts of the cave, and lowered heavily armed squads down there. as many of those things were shot down as they could find, and as much of that cave that we could reach was lined with explosives. That cave doesn't exist anymore. I quit that fucking job after that. I'd already seen tons of shit, trust me. Serial killers, serial rapists, serial this and that, heads cut in half from brutal accidents, human body segments strewn everywhere. If it was horrible, I'd probably seen it. But whatever the hell these boogeyman shits were, was where I drew the line. I am perfectly content not going and looking for whatever the hell else might be out there. I am also not convinced all those things are gone. After our investigation, whoever was left of the townspeople booked it out of there. We'd already told the press to piss off, and they did mostly because we threatened to ruin or take their lives if they didn't. Rumours from curious visitors, tourists, ghost hunter types, whatever brand of idiot you want to call anyone that goes there. Those rumours say that people are seeing things in the water, seeing things darting through the woods, hearing weird noises as they pass through town. I'm sure as absolute fuck not going back. Why tell you this, though? Well, for one, who the hell is going to believe me anyway? Secondly, I've been craving the gratification, or maybe some kind of closure by sharing this with at least one person who might take me seriously. You try explaining this shit to your wife, or your therapist, or literally anyone who wasn't there without sounding absolutely bonkers. And for those who for some reason might be concerned for my safety for sharing this, don't worry about it. There are secrets and cases that will die with me. But this one, if they come put me down or arrest me for sharing what sounds like melodramatic crazy hoo-ha, I think I'd be better off anyway. Just please, don't go looking for weird shit. Let it stay out there, hidden and weird on its own. Just let it be, or run as far away if it gets too close. Don't be a hero. You'll die. Well, listeners, I sincerely hope you enjoyed the tales that I brought you this evening. It would be a great pleasure to me if you would like, comment, and subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. And please wait for me to bring you more tales to alter your perception of how the world may really be. This is Ramblingramm, signing off. Good night, listeners, and sweet dreams.
Horror Hive.
Something happened in Alaska 16 years ago that you're not supposed to know about. By Hornsby. I'll keep my introduction short. I was never really good at them anyways. But this time I feel it's mainly how nervous I am. In order to protect the identity of myself and the others in this account, I'll be using aliases and leave out certain details that won't take away from the story itself in any way. I'll refer to myself as Whitley. Reddit seems like a place I can, well, leak this information without it being noticed or taken seriously. I've kept this secret for 16 years, but unfortunately, despite the risk to myself and my family, I've decided I need to come clean in some sort of way. So, here's my story. I grew up in Fairbanks, Alaska. Fairbanks is more or less just like most cities in the lower states. just surrounded by the stereotypical frozen nothingness of Alaska. Anyways, as many young men and women do, I joined the military at age 18. Long story short, by 2002, I found myself stationed in Fairbanks at Fort Wainwright. It was a strange time for the military in the post-9/11 wake. Kids were joining the military more than ever, of course, but I mean strange in a different way. The military's metaphorical ego had been dented by a group of terrorist hijackers, and now the military as a whole was, for lack of a better word, paranoid. It was the equivalent of Mike Tyson being slapped in the face in public by another man. Radars were revamped and were constantly monitored in order to avoid another attack on American soil. And it's partially because of this that I'm sitting here with a story to tell. On March 13th, 2002, multiple military and civilian radar detected an object enter Alaskan airspace, and presumably crash in the nearby Yukon Flats Wildlife Refuge. I was selected along with 10 other men by one of our superiors, Brown, on what we were calling a search and rescue mission to locate the crashed object. A few things were off about this operation. It was treated almost like a full-out exercise. We were told to essentially dress for war. At the time, I assumed this was due to the stigma surrounding suspicious plane crashes. Now, I'm not so sure. Another reason things were so strange was that one of the highest-ranking officers at the base, Hatfield, was to accompany us on this mission. That didn't make sense to me at the time. Why would they send aged Hatfield out to the middle of a frozen wasteland to identify a plane crash when Brown was more than capable? I'd soon have answers to that. The helicopter ride was shorter than expected. In one helicopter was myself, Hatfield, Brown, Flynn, Bradshaw and Dobbs. In the other was Brown's second-in-command, Anderson, who was now third in command on this mission. Carter, Ramos, Smith, Wallace and Morgan. Of course, there were 2 pilots as well. Hatfield was a quiet, well-mannered man. He had always been well-respected and feared in the ranks as a leader. But when we made it over the last ridge and saw what we had come looking for, he changed. The sight we were met with as the moon lit up the otherwise dark Alaskan night was a massive, dark grey cylindrical object burning in a fiery blaze in a large clearing, surrounded by nothing more than snow, trees, and a nearby pond. It was more or less the size of a 747, but no wings or propulsion system were visible on this thing. At first glance, I thought it was a place, or an experimental aircraft either from here or Russia. Hatfield's new demeanour told a different story. "That's a big-ass fucking plane," said Dobbs, who was met with a glare of pure fury and annoyance by Hatfield. He glared at him through uncomfortable silence mixed with the chopping of the propellers, until snarling, "Yeah, I wish it was a fucking plane." When we finally landed, it was pretty clear to all of us what we were dealing with. None of us wanted to say it. We silently understood and followed the orders Hatfield angrily barked at us. And we landed and were told to approach the object with weapons drawn, as the surrounding flames began to quickly die down, overwhelmed by frigid temperatures. Hatfield ordered us to stop when he felt we were close enough. And it was then when we all seemed to notice the bystander walking towards us, with his hands raised in a mix of a greeting wave and a surrender. Hatfield seemed annoyed more than anything else when we landed, and the presence of this bystander pissed him off more than anything. "Can you all believe this?" the older man said. "Do you all know what in the hell this thing even is?" Hatfield looked at the ground for a moment, shook his head, then walked up to shake the man's hand. "What exactly did you see here this evening, sir?" asked Hatfield with an overwhelmingly sarcastic smile. He was somehow sweating almost profusely in the chilly Alaskan night. "Well," said the bystander, "my house is a little bit in that direction. I heard this thing crash, and you're seeing exactly what I saw when I made my way over." Hatfield looked him directly in the eye the whole time, smiling and nodding like a madman. That must explain Hatfield's next course of action. "That's not the answer I was looking for, my friend," said Hatfield. This comment drew an expression of confusion on the bystander's face, similar to the one he would wear after Hatfield drew a pistol and shot him in the chest 4 times. We all stood there in a state of shock and simultaneous understanding. He had just murdered an innocent man, but all for the perceived well-being of the rest of humanity. "Let that be a lesson to all of you who don't understand," bellowed Hatfield. "No one is to find out about what happens or has happened here tonight unless you are asked about it by your superiors, or else you may end up like this man, who just tragically died in a hunting accident a minute ago." None of us were new to the military. We knew that though any and all of the shady shit we would see in our service, our best options were to follow orders and ask no questions. Speaking of following orders, Hatfield broke the silence and ordered us to investigate the crashed object. It had broken up into a few sections, but they remained adjacent to each other. We entered through the break in the ship that was closest to what we assumed to be the front. The interior of this thing was, fittingly, straight out of a sci-fi film. The walls of the elongated control room were covered in unfamiliar technology and strange writing. I should have seen this coming, but the sight of 2 humanoid bodies slouched against the wall to my right freaked me out pretty bad. The beings were around 5 feet tall, skinny, and with pale grey skin and long appendages. Upon seeing them, Brown let out a surprised, "Well, wouldn't you fucking know it? It's goddamn E.T.'s parents." Hatfield took one look at them and angrily muttered, "Of all the people that could have had to deal with cleaning this type of shit up, it just had to be me." He pulled out his radio to talk to the helicopter pilot. "Guardian 1, this is Hatfield. Do you copy? Over." "Guardian 1 copies, Hatfield. What's your status, over?" The radio crackled. "Tell the base that we got a code Orion level 5, and that they gotta get a crew out here ASAP to clear this out. Tell them it's a big haul, and that they gotta get as many vehicles and men up here as protocol will allow. Over," said Hatfield, noticeably trying to suppress his own nerves. "Copy that, Hatfield. Over." "Alright, let's keep moving," said Hatfield, pointing toward the back of the object. We continued our search until we came across a room toward the back of the ship. The room had been broken in a few areas on both sides, leading to the outside. In the room there was another body, but something was different. While this body was the same type as those in the front of the ship, it was visibly torn apart. The one mark that stood out was a massive hole that went straight through the torso of the being. "Jesus Christ! What happened to that one?" asked Anderson. It looked like someone had taken a light bulb and just thrown it through the damn thing like a javelin. In the room there appeared to be 2 giant side rooms made of different materials than the rest of the interior. We determined they were some type of cell. But for what? "Hatfield, come take a look at this," said Bradshaw from the break in the ship that faced the opposite side that we had landed and entered. Hatfield walked over, and upon seeing what Bradshaw intended him to, let out a soft and worried, "Oh my good lord." We all looked over to see what they were looking at. A trail of huge circular tracks leading out from the object to the nearby tree line. I'm sure that everyone else there put it together just as soon as I did. Whatever was in one of those cells broke out on landing, killed that thing in the room with it, and escaped into the Alaskan wilderness. Perhaps worst of all, we were the ones that were going to have to go hunt it down. Bradshaw and Flynn were the lucky bastards that got to stay behind and wait for the clean-up crew to arrive, while the rest of us were to go with Hatfield and Brown to find that thing before it made it too far. I wasn't exactly sure if the directive was to take the thing alive or kill it if and when we found it. All I knew was we were going in blind to hunt down God knows what had been held captive on that ship. The forest was pitch black compared to the clearing the crash site was in. The upper canopy of the foliage was so dense that the only source of light eventually became the lights on our rifles, as we made our way in formation through the woods, following Hatfield as he in turn followed the thing's tracks. Compared to the rest of the men I had ever served with, I'd consider the group I was with to be the most elite collection of individuals I'd ever been part of. These weren't kids. These were men. These were the finest soldiers that Fort Wainwright had to offer, and there was a reason they had sent them here, because they knew that anything could have possibly crashed here, even something out of our worst nightmares. From the beginning, we were all focused and professional. We had a job to do, and unlike most of the younger men and women at the base, there was going to be no dicking around on this one. It didn't take long for us to find where the tracks led. We found ourselves looking into a massive cave carved into the base of one of the nearby mountains. Hatfield drew his pistol and turned to us. "On your toes, gentlemen. We got him. Brown, take point. The rest of you follow with me." The cave was massive, with many different compartments, but none of them had much depth to them. So we continued through the main tunnel until Brown stopped the line and muttered a "Mother of God" to the rest of us. He shone his flashlight at a grizzly bear, probably 500 to 600 pounds, left in the same condition as the being we had found in the cell room. It too had a massive circular puncture hole, identical to the tracks we had followed. It was sat slumped against the cave wall, dead. You could almost feel each man in that cave compartment slowly retract into their inner child as primal fear came over them. This thing we were hunting had walked into a grizzly bear's home, kicked its ass, and left it for dead. If it could do that to a bear, imagine what it would do to us. Wallace was the one that had the misfortune of saying what the majority of us were thinking. "We gotta get the fuck out of here now!" He got the death stare from Hatfield, who proceeded to get in his face. "Quit being such a pussy, Wallace. Man has been killing bears for centuries. We turn those fuckers into runks with the snap of our fingers. We got a job to do. Take this thing out, and as your superior, I'm ordering you all to do it. Any questions?" The compartment fell silent. our courage somewhat restored. We remembered. We were men, and we had a job to do. The compartment we were in, clearly the bear's former lair, split off into 3 tunnels. Brown took Smith and Wallace through the tunnel on the right. Anderson took Carter and Ramos through the tunnel on the left. I went with Morgan, Dobbs and Hatfield through the middle tunnel. We were silent the whole time. Sure, I had questions, but I sure as hell wasn't about to ask Hatfield any of them. We went through until the tunnel became too small for us to continue, so we began to head back up to the compartment. Since radio communications didn't work in the cave, we agreed that we would all meet up in the compartment if we finished our search, or if something went wrong. When we were about halfway back, we began to hear shots being fired and the screams of our fellow servicemen. We sprinted back up the tunnel to the compartment, where Brown and his group were already waiting for us. "It sounds like it came from Anderson's group," said Brown. "Well, let's get the fuck down there then. Whitley, you're on point," said Hatfield, trying desperately to mask his nerves. We made our way quietly down the tunnel, trying to move as efficiently as possible. The reality was that if no one from Anderson's group had met up with us by now, something had gone very wrong. Since I was on point, I was the first one to see Ramos when we turned a blind corner in the cave. He was sitting up against the cave wall, clearly trying to stay hidden from something. When he saw us, he breathed a sigh of relief and quickly sprung up, motioning us to stay quiet. For the life of me, I will never know what possessed Hatfield to loudly ask, "Ramos, what in the hell happened down here?" But the very moment he did that, it was as if Satan himself opened the gates of hell onto us. From out of the dark abyss behind Ramos, a massive, pale red appendage drove straight through his body. Our rifle light shone onto something I don't think my mind would be able to construct itself in my worst nightmare. A massive, mantis-like creature had just impaled Ramos, whose body was then flung into me from a good 15 feet away, knocking me back into the group. The rest was a total blur of carnage and bullets. When I saw the first person turn to flee, I did the same. I took one fleeting glimpse back around the corner to see a group of fully armed, experienced military veterans, arguably the very top of the food chain on our planet, being ripped to shreds by this thing. Sure, we were the top of the food chain here, but this thing wasn't from here. I followed the 3 men that had fled from the cave in front of me. We sprinted for God knows how long on pure fear and adrenaline until we reached the clearing, where reinforcements from the base had arrived and were clearing up the wreckage. In fact, another superior of ours, Banks, was on our way to find where our group had gone with a group of his own, since we had been out of communication for a while. I looked at the remainder of the group that had fled. It was myself, Brown and Wallace. There had been another, but we weren't sure who it was or where they were. "Gentlemen, what happened to Hatfield and the rest of your group?" inquired Banks. Brown somehow was in a mental state in which he could answer the question. They're dead, sir. There's something out there, something from that ship, and we couldn't stop it." Banks was oddly calm when he heard this. "Where is this thing now, Brown?" "We followed it to a cave, and that's where it happened." Banks nodded. "Gentlemen, you spent this evening at base today, March 13, 2002. During that time, an accident occurred that led to the loss of Hatfield and the rest of your group. The nature of this accident made it so that their bodies were unable to be recovered. Am I clear?" We all nodded, and it was over for them, and it was finally over for us. We were sent back to Fort Wainwright and questioned by our superiors about what happened, each time being told that we were not to speak of the incident unless spoken to about it by one of them, and that we were at the base all day, where an accident happened, something with fuel tanks or whatever. While this haunted my existence for the next few years, I knew I had no choice but to put it behind me, and so that's what I did. One day, a few buddies of mine pulled me aside and told me what had happened after I left the scene. Banks had ordered a massive sweep of the area of the cave, with a much larger force than we had gone in with. They found something disturbing. Morgan was the other man that had fled the cave with us. They knew this because not too far from the cave, they found his body, impaled and slammed into a tree with such force that the tree had been knocked down. The thing's tracks leading from the body showed that it had fled into the wilderness, and was long gone. Inside the cave they found and identified the bodies of Hatfield, Anderson, Ramos, Carter, Smith, and Dobbs, all torn apart by that thing. It was like the bullets didn't even affect it. It just kept mowing them down like a machine. Now that I've left the armed forces, moved and had time to think, I finally made the decision to tell the truth in a way that hopefully won't hurt me or my family. I set this account up using information that will be difficult to trace to me, and I even went as far as to post this using a computer at a public library in a state I don't even live in. Hopefully, you take this information for what it's worth, because that thing's still out there, and God only knows where it is and what it's capable of.